I didn't have a title, not the kind the other girls carried like perfume, princess of this, lady of that, heir of a glittering bloodline that could command fire or bend moonlight into ribbons. I was just Leora, human, a seamstress's daughter with hands that could stitch silk without snagging it, and a heart that never learned to ask for impossible things. And the most impossible thing in all of Aetherwyn was the Elf Prince. They called him Caelan, Starfell. Every princess wanted him, not only for the throne of the Evergrove or for the ancient alliances his marriage could seal, but because the way he moved through a room made people forget their own breathing, because his eyes, silver green and quiet, looked as if they had seen the end of stories and still chose to begin again. The other girls practiced in mirrors. They rehearsed laughs that sounded like wind chimes and tears that shone, exactly once before falling. Their magic flared at the edges of their tempers, tiny lightning cracks, drifting petals, sparks of frost. Even the palace air seemed to bow to them. I had nothing like that. I had thread. I had patience. I had the ability to disappear when rooms became too bright, which was how I ended up in the moonlit gallery on the evening the prince returned from the border wars, standing behind a curtain of embroidered vines with a tray in my hands, offering spiced cider to women who didn't see servants as human, let alone as girls with names. My mother had warned me before I left our narrow house in the lower terraces. Keep your eyes down, Leora. Don't get caught dreaming. I had promised her I wouldn't. Then Caelan entered the gallery, and the promise cracked like thin ice. He arrived without announcement. No trumpets, no fanfare, just the sudden hush of silk and whispered envy, like an entire room inhaling in one sharp breath. Princess Morel, who could summon swans from the fountain as easily as breathing, tilted her chin toward him. Princess Sarah, whose laughter made glass sing, stepped forward at once. Even Princess Elwyn of the Sun Court, with a crown of living gold leaves, drifted closer, her magic trailing warm light. I didn't move. I couldn't. My hands trembled on the tray, and I pressed my fingertips into the wood until the shaking stopped. I reminded myself I wasn't part of this world. I was only here because the palace tailors were short 2 apprentices, and my stitches were fine enough to earn me a temporary contract. Temporary. Like everything about me in this place. Caelan greeted the nobles with a slight bow. His smile was polite, practiced, but his gaze didn't linger on the sparkling gowns or the enchanted jewels. It passed. Over them the way sunlight passes over a lake. Beautiful, but not caught. Then, somehow, his eyes found the curtain. Found me. The sensation was so strange I nearly dropped the tray. It wasn't that he stared. It wasn't bold or greedy. It was simply aware, like he'd heard a sound nobody else could hear, and he was turning toward it, curious. Princess Morel noticed. Her gaze snapped to where Caelan's attention had shifted, and she narrowed her eyes as if the air itself had insulted her. I stepped backward instinctively. The curtain brushed my shoulder, and one embroidered vine snagged the edge of my sleeve. I tugged gently, trying not to tear it. The movement made the beads sewn into the fabric clink softly. 3 tiny clicks. Caelan's head tilted. 3 clicks. His expression changed. So quickly I would have missed it if I hadn't been watching him like a fool. Recognition. As if that sound belonged to a memory. Princess Elwyn glided between him and the curtain, blocking his view with a smile sharp as jewelry. "Your Highness," she purred, "we have waited weeks to welcome you. Will you honor the gallery with a dance tonight?" A chorus of agreement rose, sweet and suffocating. Caelan's gaze stayed on Elwyn's face for a moment, respectful. Then he looked past her again, past all of them, to the curtain, to me. "I will," he said, softly. But not yet. He stepped away from the semicircle of princes and princesses in waiting, and the room swayed with surprise. The nobles parted as if forced by an invisible tide. I tried to melt into the shadows behind the curtain, but there was nowhere to go without turning my back and running, and I couldn't run, not in the palace, not from a prince. He approached the curtain, close enough that the scent of night rain clung faintly to him. I lowered my eyes, my mother's warning pounding in my skull. "Keep your eyes down," but I felt him stop, felt his presence like a shift in gravity. "You," Caelan said. It wasn't a command. It was a question disguised as certainty. My throat went dry. "Your Highness, I'm only a seamstress," he finished. The word stunned me. He shouldn't know that. I hadn't been introduced. I hadn't spoken. I lifted my gaze just enough to see his hands. Long fingers, no rings, a thin scar along his knuckle, pale against moonlit skin. His eyes were fixed on the sleeve of my dress where the embroidered vine had snagged. The beads glittered near my wrist. He reached out, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. His fingers brushed the beads. 3 tiny clicks again. For a heartbeat, the entire world narrowed to that sound. Caelan's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice suddenly rough. I swallowed. "I made it." His eyes flicked up to mine, and something in his face softened. Not pity, not amusement, interest. That stitch, he murmured. I know it. I should have denied it. I should have lied. But the truth rose in me like a stubborn flame. My father used to sew, I said quietly, before he died. He taught me a pattern he said was older than old. He called it the starfall stitch. The prince went still. Around us, the gallery held its breath again. I could feel the princesses staring like knives. Caelan's voice dropped lower. My mother wore a cloak once, when I was a child. It had that stitch at the hem. She said it was made by a human artisan who saved her life at the river of glass. I blinked, shocked. That's a story. No, he said. It's a memory. His gaze searched my face as if looking for something hidden there, something that might explain why. The air felt different near me. I tried to step back, but the curtain caught at my shoulder again. I was trapped between silk and curiosity. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to exist, he said, and there was the faintest edge of anger in it. Not at me, but at the idea that I would shrink myself so completely. I stared at him, startled. The prince's expression changed again, as if he'd revealed too much. He drew back, slightly, regaining control. What is your name? He asked. I hesitated. Names mattered here. Names were announced. Names were measured, but his eyes were steady, patient. Leora, I said. He repeated it as if tasting it. Leora. Princess Morelle's voice snapped through the hush like a whip. Your Highness, you're frightening the help. A ripple of laughter followed. Small, cruel, delighted. Heat rose in my cheeks. I lowered my eyes again, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me. But Caelan turned toward Morelle, and the air seemed to sharpen. She is not help, he said evenly. Morelle's smile faltered for the first time. Caelan looked back at me. His voice softened again. Will you walk with me, Leora? Just to the terrace. I would speak where the air is honest. Every warning I had ever been given screamed no. I had no magic, no protection, no right to refuse a prince, or to accept him. But something inside me, something long, buried under years of being small, lifted its head. I nodded once. I will, I said, and the room exploded into whispers. As we crossed the gallery, my knees threatened to betray me. I held the tray with both hands, because I didn't know what else to do with them. Caelan walked beside me, matching my pace, not hurrying, not forcing. At the terrace doors, he paused. Leave the tray, he said. Gently, I set it down on a marble table. My fingers were numb. Outside, the night was cool and silver. The gardens below were a sea of dark leaves and glowing lanterns. Somewhere, a fountain sang. Caelan leaned on the balustrade, looking out as if the sky had answers. Then he spoke without turning. Tomorrow night, he said, the selection begins. I knew of it. Everyone did. The prince would choose his future consort from the gathered princesses, a ceremony of magic and heritage, sealed by the ancient Crownwood. It has always been a performance, he continued, a parade of power. He finally glanced at me, and the moon made his eyes look like stormlight. But tonight, I heard a sound I haven't heard since my mother was alive. 3 clicks. My beads. My throat tightened. I don't understand why that matters. It matters, he said, as if the words cost him. Because my mother died protecting a secret, and I think your father may have known it. My chest went cold. I shook my head. My father was only a tailor. Caelan's gaze sharpened. Tailors see what armor hides. Seamstresses hear what courts whisper. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Tell me, Leora, did your father ever warn you about the Crownwood? The name hit me like a bell. Because yes, because my father, on nights when the wind sounded like wolves, had held my hands and said, never let them place the living crown on your head. Never. I had thought it was madness, grief, old fear. But Caelan was watching me as if he already knew the answer. My lips parted, and before I could speak, the terrace doors opened behind us. A servant rushed out, face pale. Your Highness, he gasped. The Crownwood has awakened. The roots are moving. The selection has been moved to sunrise, and he looked at me, fear widening his eyes. And the tree is calling for the human girl. The world went silent. Caelan's hand closed on the stone balustrade so hard his knuckles went white. Then he did something I would remember for the rest of my life. He stepped between me and the doorway, as if my small human body was something worth shielding, and he said, loud enough for the watching nobles to hear through the open doors, then sunrise will have my answer. He turned to me, voice low again, urgent and strangely gentle. Leora, he whispered, whatever you're hiding, whatever your father told you, you must tell me now, because if the Crownwood is calling you, it is not to crown you. He swallowed. It is to test you. And I realized, with a sick twist of certainty, that the selection wasn't about choosing a bride anymore. It was about choosing a sacrifice. Comments and subscribe to the channel, because what happens at sunrise will change everything I thought I knew about being powerless. The palace didn't sleep after that. It trembled. Servants moved like shadows with lanterns held low, and nobles drifted through the corridors in clusters that smelled of perfume and panic. Somewhere in the lower levels, I heard the scrape of something heavy against stone, roots maybe, or the iron gates being dragged shut. The air itself felt charged, like a storm deciding where to strike. Caelan guided me through a side passage I'd never used before, away from the moonlit gallery and the listening doors. His hand hovered near my elbow without touching, as if he knew one brush of skin might break whatever fragile control I had left. "Do you have a place you can lock from the inside?" he asked. I forced my voice to work. "The seamstress quarters. There's a bolt." "Good." His eyes flicked to the archways as we passed. "Do not open it for anyone. Not even a noble who claims the queen sent them." My heartbeat hammered. "Why would they come for me?" He didn't answer right away. He turned a corner, and for a moment the corridor opened into a wide hall lined with portraits. Elf queens stared down with expressions of serene cruelty. Their crowns looked alive, twining vines and carved antler, jeweled fruit that might have been real. Under each portrait was a name etched into silver. I had walked this hall once to deliver a repaired gown. I hadn't dared look up. Now I did, because Caelan stopped abruptly. His gaze was fixed on a portrait near the end. A young elf queen with star-bright eyes and a cloak pinned at the shoulder by a moonstone brooch. At the hem of that cloak, even from here, I saw it. Tiny clustered stitches forming a pattern like falling light. The starfall stitch. My stomach tightened. "That's her," Caelan said quietly. His mother. The painted queen looked too alive to be dead, too real to be a story, too calm for someone who had raised a child who now looked like he carried a war behind his ribs. Caelan's jaw flexed. "They will come for you because the Crownwood called you. That has not happened not like this." He exhaled. "When the tree calls, the court obeys. Even the queen." The queen. I had never seen her. Not truly. I'd glimpsed a figure once across a balcony. Tall, cold as carved ice, crowned with something that looked like branch and bone. I had told myself I imagined it. My throat dried again. Why would a tree want me? Caelan finally looked at me, and the honesty in his eyes made my chest hurt. "Because the Crownwood feeds on magic," he said. "It keeps the Evergrove alive. It keeps our borders sealed. It keeps our bloodlines bright." I stared at him, trying to fit the words into something that made sense. "But I don't have magic," I whispered. His gaze didn't soften. It sharpened. "That's why I'm afraid." A cold wave rolled through me. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small token, an old coin, dark metal with a symbol pressed into it, a star falling through a circle of roots. He placed it in my palm and closed my fingers over it. "If someone tries to take you," he said, "show them this. Say, Starfall debt." My hand trembled around the coin. "What is this?" "A promise," he replied, "and a threat, depending on who hears it." Then he did touch me, just a brief pressure at my shoulder, steadying me as the corridor swayed under my feet. "Now tell me," he said, voice low. "What did your father warn you about the Crownwood?" I wanted to answer. I wanted to hand him every memory like a bundle of cloth, but my father's voice rose in my mind like a ghost. "Never let them place the living crown on your head. Never." And another thing, something he said only once, on a night when he sat with his back against our door as if expecting it to be kicked in. "If the tree calls you, it's because it cannot taste you, and what it cannot taste, it will try to break." My tongue felt heavy. He said, "The Crownwood lies." Caelan's eyes narrowed. "How?" "He said it pretends to choose," I whispered. "But it really consumes." A muscle jumped in his jaw. He looked away, toward a window where the night sky pressed close and starless. "My mother said something like that once," he murmured, "before she died." The words landed like stones. I turned to him. "How did she die?" His silence was answer enough at first. Then he spoke, carefully, as if choosing each word could stop it from bleeding. "They told me she fell ill," he said. "They said the Crownwood demanded a greater offering during the border plague, and she offered herself willingly. A queen's sacrifice, a noble ending." His fingers tightened on the window ledge. "I was a child," he continued. "I believed them because believing was easier than seeing the truth." He looked at me again, and I saw it. Rage wrapped in restraint, grief held like a blade. "But I found her journal. Years later," he said. "Pages torn out, ink smudged, and one line left intact." My breath caught. "She wrote," Caelan said, "the tree cannot touch what is truly human." My knees nearly gave out, because my father had said the same thing in different words. Because if his mother believed that, and my father believed that, then someone had spent years making sure humans never came near the Crownwood, and now the tree was calling for one. Me. A door. Down the corridor opened with a creak. Caelan's head snapped up instantly. His whole body changed, like a wolf scenting danger. He stepped in front of me without thinking. A servant appeared, older, hunched, carrying a bundle of linen. His eyes were downcast, but when he lifted them, they were too sharp for a servant's. Caelan's voice turned cold. "Who are you?" The man bowed too quickly. Apologies, Your Highness. I was sent to escort the human girl to the dawn chamber for preparations. Caelan didn't move. By whom? The Lady Morel, the man said smoothly. She feared the girl might be frightened alone. Morel. My stomach twisted. Caelan's eyes flashed. She has no authority over my household. The servant's smile didn't reach his eyes. The selection is no longer your household matter, Your Highness. It belongs to the Crownwood. We all belong to it at sunrise. Caelan's hand drifted toward the dagger at his belt. Not drawn, yet. I felt the coin in my fist, hot as if it had been heated. Leora stays where she is, Caelan said. The servant's gaze slid past him, fixing on me. The tree called her. I swallowed hard and forced my voice out. No, I said. Both of them looked at me. My heart hammered so violently I wondered if it would crack my ribs. I opened my palm and showed the coin. Starfall debt, I said, the words tasting strange and ancient. The servant's face changed so quickly it was almost frightening. The color drained from his skin. His mouth tightened. His eyes flicked, just once, toward the portrait hall behind us, as if expecting the painted queen to step down and strike him. He bowed again, deeper this time, and his voice lost its smoothness. Forgive me, he said. I didn't know. Caelan didn't relax. Now you do. The servant backed away, retreating like someone who had walked too close to a cliff edge. When the door shut, the corridor felt different, less hunted, but not safe. I stared at the coin, then at Caelan. What did I just do? You claimed protection, he said. From an old vow the court wishes was forgotten. My voice shook. So why did Myrell send him? Caelan's gaze darkened. Because the princesses are not waiting for me to choose anymore, he said. They are waiting for the Crownwood to choose. I swallowed. And if it chooses me, Caelan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then they will dress you in white and call it honor, he said. And when the roots wrap around your wrists, they will look away and pretend it's destiny. My blood turned to ice. Caelan, I whispered, because it was the first time I dared say his name without a title. I don't want to die. His face softened, just a crack, just enough to show the boy he used to be. Then you won't, he said, fierce and quiet. Not while I still have breath. He glanced down the corridor, then back at me. Come, he said. If sunrise has been moved, then preparations have too. They will try again. We need to get you somewhere no one expects. Where? I asked. His answer was immediate. The Crownwood, he said. I stared at him, horrified. You just said, I know what I said. His voice sharpened. But there is one place beneath the tree where no one goes, not even the queen. A hollow chamber the roots sealed long ago. He hesitated, and something unspoken passed through his eyes. My mother took me there once, he admitted. She called it the Undersong. She said if the day ever came when the Crownwood called for the wrong reason, the Undersong would tell the truth. My breath came short. And you think it will help us? I think it's our only chance, he said. A bell began to toll somewhere deep in the palace, slow and heavy. Dawn summons. Even though the sky outside was still black, Caelan took my hand. Not my wrist, not like a command. My hand, fingers threading through mine as if I were equal enough to hold. Listen to me, he said, urgent. When we reach the tree, no matter what you hear, no matter what you feel, do not accept a crown. Do not speak vows. Do not let anyone place anything on your head. My father's warning echoed like thunder. Never let them place the living crown on your head. Never. I nodded, throat too tight for words. We moved through the palace by passages that smelled of moss and old stone, down staircases carved into the bones of the castle, past doors sealed with glyphs that glowed faintly as Caelan passed, recognizing him like blood recognizing blood. The deeper we went, the colder the air became. Then we reached a set of doors so ancient they looked grown rather than built, wood fused with root, iron braided like vines. On the surface, carved in a language I couldn't read, was the same symbol stamped on my coin, a falling star trapped in a ring of roots. Caelan's hand hovered over it. I need you to trust me, he said, voice barely more than a breath. I laughed once, brittle. I'm human in an elf palace. Trust is all. I have left. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Then he pressed his palm to the door. The symbol flared. The doors opened, not outward but inward, like lungs drawing a breath. And the smell that spilled out wasn't forest. It was earth after rain. It was sap and sorrow. It was something alive that had been waiting. From the darkness beyond, a sound rose. Not a voice, not words, but a low vibration that seemed to hum inside my bones. The undersong. My vision blurred as if the air had turned into water. The hairs on my arms lifted. Caelan tightened his grip on my hand. And in that humming, I heard something that made my blood freeze. My name, not spoken, sung, Leora. And beneath it, like a second melody braided into the first, a whisper that wasn't mine and wasn't Caelan's, but felt like it had been stitched into my life from the beginning. Starfall, child. Return what was taken. The doorway swallowed sound. The moment Caelan and I stepped through, the palace bells faded as if someone had smothered them with velvet. Even our footsteps changed. turning soft and damp against the ground. There was no polished stone here, no marble meant to impress visiting courts. This place felt older than pride. The air tasted like wet soil and resin. It carried a strange sweetness too, like crushed pine needles and honey left too long in the dark. The undersong didn't come from one direction. It was everywhere, under my tongue, behind my eyes, inside my ribs. Leora, Starfall child, return what was taken. My knees went weak. Caelan's fingers tightened around mine, steadying me as the darkness thickened. The corridor beyond the doors was narrow at first, roots forming a living arch overhead. They weren't dead roots either. They pulsed faintly, like veins. Caelan leaned close, his voice barely a breath. "Do you hear it?" "Yes," I whispered, and immediately regretted it, because the undersong reacted. The humming sharpened, as if the place had been waiting for the sound of my voice, for proof that I was real. A thin thread of light seeped from somewhere ahead. Not torchlight, not lantern. It looked like moonlight that had been strained through leaves, pale and trembling. As we moved toward it, the root walls widened, opening into a chamber that made my lungs forget how to fill. It wasn't a room. It was a hollow inside the living world, roots curled up and around like ribs, forming a dome. From the ceiling hung small crystals that glowed softly, as if they had stored starlight for centuries. The ground was layered with moss, and in the center sat a stone altar, cracked down the middle. And on that altar was something I never expected to see in an elf sanctum, a human object, a sewing needle. Not an ordinary one. It was longer, forged from dark silver metal, its eyes shaped like a tiny falling star. Beside it lay a strip of fabric so old it looked like it might turn to dust if I breathed too hard. The starfall stitch ran along its edge. My throat closed. Caelan went still beside me. "That's impossible." I couldn't answer. My feet carried me forward without permission, drawn by a pull that felt stitched into my bones. The undersong grew louder the closer I got, until it was almost painful. When I reached the altar, I saw more. Faint symbols carved into the stone. Not the elegant flowing elf runes I'd glimpsed in books. These were harsh and simple, cut deep as if the carver had been furious. A language my eyes didn't know, but my body did, because I understood them anyway. Not with my mind, with the place in me that remembered my father's hands, guiding mine through thread. A debt, a bargain, a warning. Caelan moved around the altar, scanning the carvings. His face looked carved from restraint, but his eyes were bright with something dangerously close to hope. "This is what my mother hid," he murmured. "Proof. She said the undersong tells the truth." I reached toward the needle, then stopped, my fingers hovering a breath away. The undersong whispered again, warmer now, coaxing. "Return what was taken." My skin prickled. "Caelan, what was taken?" His gaze met mine. "I don't know, but if this chamber holds a human needle beneath the crownwood, then someone wanted a human here long ago." The implication landed like a blow. Someone wanted a human sacrifice, or someone wanted a human key. My hand trembled over the needle's eye. I thought of my father's voice, low and urgent, the night he sat against our door. "If the tree calls you, it's because it cannot taste you, and what it cannot taste, it will try to break." I swallowed. My father said the crownwood lies, that it pretends to choose. Caelan's jaw tightened, and the court pretends to believe it. I pulled my hand back. "Then why bring me here? If the tree is dangerous, because this chamber isn't the tree," he said. "It's beneath it. It's the place my mother trusted when she didn't trust the crownwood itself." He paused, and something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe. Not for himself, for me. "If the crownwood is calling you at sunrise," he said carefully, "we need to know why. We need to know what it wants from someone with no magic." No magic. The words always felt like a bruise. In the palace, they meant I was nothing. Here, beneath the roots, they sounded like a weapon. I took a slow breath and made myself do the thing I hated most. I looked at the truth head on. "What if the crownwood needs someone it can't taste?" I said quietly. "Because it wants to use them. Like a glove." Caelan stared at me. Then he nodded once, very slowly. "A conduit." The chamber seemed to listen harder. The crystals overhead brightened, as if approving that we were finally speaking the right language. My eyes drifted back to the needle. Something in my chest tugged again, gentle but insistent. My father's hands guiding mine, thread sliding through fabric, the tiny satisfaction when the stitch sat perfectly, invisible from one side and strong from the other. I realized, with sudden clarity, why my father had taught me that pattern. Not for beauty, for survival. A sharp sound echoed from the corridor behind us. Footsteps, not ours. Caelan spun, pulling me slightly back from the altar. His other hand dropped to his belt, where his dagger waited. The chamber's light dimmed instantly, as if hiding. The footsteps stopped at the threshold. A voice drifted in, smooth as poured wine. "Your Highness," it said, amused. How predictable. Princess Mirelle stepped into the chamber as if she belonged there, and she wasn't alone. 2 guards followed her, their armor etched with root patterns. Behind them came a figure I recognized from rumor alone. Tall, draped in pale robes, face obscured by a veil of silver chain, a crownwood attendant. The ones who prepared offerings. My stomach turned. Morel's gaze slid to me and her smile sharpened. The human girl. Of course the tree would call for something rare. Caelan's voice turned lethal. Leave. Morel laughed softly. You don't command this, Caelan. The Crownwood does. The veiled attendant lifted a hand, and the undersong shifted, becoming a low throb that made my teeth ache. The crystals flickered. The guard stepped forward. Caelan moved in front of me again, shoulders squared, dagger half drawn. She isn't yours. Morel's eyes glinted. No, she said, and her voice dropped, satisfied. She's the tree's. Then the attendant spoke for the first time, voice hollow and ancient, as if it came from inside a root. The human will be crowned at sunrise, it said, or the evergrove will wither. My breath hitched, because suddenly I understood the trap. If I refused, they'd call me selfish, a murderer of their forests, the destroyer of their border magic. If I accepted, the Crownwood would get exactly what it wanted, and Morel was watching me like she couldn't wait to see which way I broke. The attendant extended a gloved hand toward the altar, toward the needle. Bring the starfall needle, it commanded. My body went cold, because the pull inside my chest surged, stronger now, desperate, as if the needle was calling me too, and my fingers, traitorous, started to move toward it on their own. My fingers kept moving even when my mind screamed at them to stop. The needle lay on the altar like it had been waiting for my touch for a lifetime, and the moment the attendant ordered it, the pull inside my chest turned into a hard, steady tug. Not pain. Not exactly. More like a thread tied to my heart, being drawn forward. I tried to clench my hands into fists. My palms sweated. My arms shook. Still, my right hand lifted, slow as sleepwalking. Caelan shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine. His voice was low, controlled. Leora, look at me. I forced my eyes to his. The silver-green steadiness in his gaze gave me something to hold on to, like a railing in a storm. Do not let them take your choice, he said. Choice. The word hit me like cold water. The undersong was trying to make me forget that I had one. I swallowed hard, drew a breath so deep it hurt, and whispered through my teeth, my hands are not yours. The crystals overhead flickered. The humming faltered for half a second, like the chamber had been surprised to hear defiance from a human throat. Princess Morel laughed softly. How touching. She thinks she can refuse the Crownwood. The attendant's gloved hand remained, outstretched, patient, and absolute. Bring the starfall needle. I stepped forward, not because my body was pulled, but because I decided to move. The difference was small, but it changed everything. I felt it immediately, like a knot loosening. My fingertips brushed the needle. It was colder than stone, not the cold of metal left outside, but the cold of something that had never truly been warm. The instant I touched it, the undersong surged into my skull, and images flashed behind my eyes so fast I nearly gasped. A river made of glass under starlight, an elf woman kneeling in blood-soaked grass, holding a human man's hands as if they were holy. My father, not older, not tired, not gray, young, terrified, determined, and the elf woman, with star-bright eyes, whispering something as he pressed the needle into her palm. Starfall debt, she breathed. Then my father's voice, raw with grief. No crown, no vows. She must never consent. The vision snapped away so violently my knees buckled. Caelan's hand caught my elbow, keeping me upright. You saw something, he murmured. I could barely breathe. My father, with your mother. Caelan went very still. Morel's smile tightened. She had been listening, and I could see the calculation turning behind her eyes like gears. This was no longer a simple court game for her. This was leverage. The attendant moved closer, its chain veil whispering. The guards advanced too, boots sinking slightly into the moss as if the ground resented them. Give it, the attendant said, and the undersong pressed at my temples, heavy and insistent. The needle pulsed faintly in my fingers, and I understood something with sudden, terrifying clarity. The Crownwood could not taste me, but it could still try to use me. It could pull. It could coax. It could threaten the world above and call it necessity. It could wrap duty around my throat until I mistook it for honor, but it could not take one thing from me unless I surrendered it. Consent. My father's warning was not only about a crown. It was about the one word that could make the tree's hunger lawful. Yes. I tightened my grip on the needle until my knuckles ached. Then I did what my father taught me to do when thread tangled. I stopped, fighting the pull, and used it. I raised the needle slowly, bringing it up between me and the attendant. The chain veil tilted, as if the thing beneath it could smell victory. Do you want this? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Morel's eyes brightened, pleased. Caelan sucked in a breath beside me, ready to lunge. The attendant held out its hand. I leaned in, close enough to see through the veil. There was no face, not truly, only shadows and a faint green glow, like sap lit from inside. A puppet, a mouthpiece for roots. My stomach turned, but I kept my voice calm. Then take it. As the attendant's glove closed around the needle, I shifted my wrist and pressed the point into the glove's fabric. Not deep, Just enough. The needle pierced cleanly. A drop formed. Not red, pale green. Sap. The attendant jerked back as if stung. The undersong cracked into a sharp, discordant note that made the crystals vibrate. The roots in the walls shuddered like a body flinching. The guards froze, suddenly uncertain. Morel's smile vanished. What did you do? I stared at the tiny green drop on the needle's tip, horror and realization colliding. You are not offering me to a sacred tree. You are feeding a parasite that wears your crown. The chamber seemed to inhale. The roots tightened, then loosened, like they were listening. The attendant recoiled, its voice warping. You must not speak against the Crownwood. I stepped forward again, holding the needle like a threat and a key at once. My father made this with hands you still fear. Your queen's own bloodline owes a debt to a human who refused to let you turn a crown into a chain. Caelan's voice was low and fierce. Leora, he was warning me, but he was also with me. Morel lifted her chin, trying to regain control. This is nonsense. A human cannot judge our tree. I looked at her and felt something inside me settle into place. Not bravery, not magic, just a clean, sharp refusal to be small. I am not judging it, I said. I am recognizing it. Then I turned toward the altar and the ancient strip of fabric, the one with the starfall stitch. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. It was softer than it should have been after so many years, as if the chamber had kept it alive. Carved into the altar beneath it, half hidden by moss, were more words. This time I read them clearly, and they hit me like a blade. The crown is a mouth, the vow is the bite. No consent, no feast. My breath came out in a shaky exhale. The undersong surged again, but it was different now. Not a command, a plea, a hunger. The attendant lunged toward me and the guards moved at last, swords half drawn. Caelan was faster. He slammed into the first guard, driving him back into the root wall. The roots reacted instantly, snapping around the guard's ankle like living ropes, as if the chamber itself had chosen a side. The second guard swung, metal flashing. Caelan ducked, and I saw the blade graze his shoulder. Blood spattered the moss. My stomach flipped. I did not have time to panic. I did what my hands knew. I threaded the needle. There was no thread on the altar, but when my fingers pinched air, something thin and bright pulled free from the undersong itself, a strand of pale light, trembling like spider silk. My breath caught. I pushed it through the needle's eye, and the strand obeyed, sliding into place as if it had always belonged there. Morel's eyes widened. Real fear now. Impossible, she whispered. I stepped toward the attendant, and the puppet hissed through its veil. Human, you will be crowned. No, I said, and the word felt like iron. I stabbed the needle into the moss at my feet and pulled, drawing the strand across the ground in a swift arc, the way my father taught me to mark fabric before cutting. The strand sank into the earth and flared. The roots in the chamber responded immediately, rising like waking snakes, curling toward the light line I had drawn. A barrier formed between me and the attendant. The puppet slammed into it and bounced back as if it had hit stone. Caelan glanced at me, breath hard, eyes bright with shock and something like relief. You can stitch the undersong. I don't know how, I gasped, but you are doing it, he said. Morel backed toward the corridor, her lips tightening. Sunrise, she snapped at the attendant. If she will not submit here, she will submit in front of everyone. The attendant's voice grated. The Evergrove will wither. Morel's gaze cut to me, cruel again. Do you want to be the girl who kills our kingdom, human? Because that is what they will call you. My throat tightened, but I held the needle steady. Caelan stepped to my side, bleeding, and his voice carried a quiet promise. Then we make sunrise ours. The bells above tolled again, louder now, closer. Dawn was coming fast, and I understood the worst part. They did not need me to be willing in this chamber. They only needed to corner me in public, wrap 1,000 eyes around my throat, and make my refusal look like murder. The undersong hummed against my skin, and the needle in my hand vibrated like a living thing. If the vow was the bite, then sunrise was when they would try to force the word from my mouth, and I had to find a way to keep it there. Caelan's blood didn't look like something that belonged in this place. Against the moss, it was too red, too honest, too human for an elf sanctum that smelled of sap and old songs. The cut on his shoulder wasn't deep enough to kill him quickly, but it was deep enough to slow him, deep enough to make every second between now and sunrise feel expensive. The barrier I'd stitched into the ground still shimmered, a thin arc of pale light that hummed with the undersong. On the other side, the veiled attendant pressed against it like a hungry mouth, and the roots in the walls trembled in sympathy, as if the chamber itself was torn between protecting me and delivering me. Morel stood just beyond the threshold, half in shadow, half in that faint crystal light. Her gaze kept sliding to my hands, not to my face, not to Caelan's blade, my hands. She had seen the needle answer me. She had felt the room react, and I could tell, with a cold certainty, that she was already rehearsing how to twist it into a story where I was the monster. "The Evergrove will wither," the attendant repeated, voice scraping like bark. Morel's mouth curved. "Hear that, human? Even the roots agree. If you have any decency, you'll stop fighting and let the tree do what it must." Caelan shifted, putting more weight on his uninjured side. His dagger stayed low, but ready. "You're using fear as a leash." Morel's eyes flicked to him, then away, as if he was only an inconvenience. "Fear is the oldest law in this kingdom. Your mother knew it. That's why she obeyed." The words hit Caelan like a slap. His breathing went sharp for a heartbeat, and I felt his rage coil tight. I stepped closer to him, not behind him, beside him. "Your Highness," I said to Morel, my voice steadier than my legs. "If you truly believed this was sacred, you wouldn't need guards." Morel's expression hardened. "And if you were truly nothing, the tree wouldn't be singing your name." The undersong pulsed at that, as if irritated that she had spoken truth by accident. My fingers tightened around the starfall needle. The thread of pale light still ran through its eye, trembling, hungry to be used. I could feel it tugging at my pulse, as if it wanted to stitch every lie in the palace shut. I didn't have time for that. I didn't have time for justice. I needed time for survival. I dragged the needle tip along the barrier line, not cutting it, but changing it. My father had taught me the difference between a seam that holds and a seam that releases. One tiny alteration in the pattern could turn strength into a doorway. The shimmering arc wavered. Caelan glanced at me. "Leora, trust me," I whispered. Then I pulled. The barrier didn't collapse. It folded, like fabric gathered into pleats. A narrow slit opened in the light, barely wide enough for a body to slip through. The attendant hissed, surging forward, but the pleats tightened as it pressed, refusing its weight. The chamber favored my hands, not its hunger. "Now," I breathed. Caelan moved first, fast despite the injury. I slipped under his arm, and together we slid through the slit in the barrier on our side, not theirs. The moment we cleared it, I snapped the needle, upward, and the light seam sealed behind us with a shiver. The attendant slammed into it again, harder, and the crystals overhead flickered. Morel's voice snapped, sharp with sudden anger. "After them!" The guards lunged, but the roots in the chamber reacted like they had before, curling around their boots and ankles, slowing them as if the undersong itself was buying us seconds. Seconds were enough. Caelan grabbed my hand and pulled me into the corridor beyond the altar chamber, toward a narrow side passage I hadn't noticed earlier. The walls here were less rib-like, more jagged, as if the roots had been forced aside long ago to make room for something that didn't belong. I stumbled once. The needle bit into my palm, and a bead of my blood welled up. The corridor reacted instantly. The roots along the walls recoiled from the red drop as if it burned. I froze. Caelan saw it too. His eyes went wide, and for the first time since the terrace, I saw real shock crack through his control. "They flinch from you," he whispered. I stared at the retreating root tips, my throat tight. "Why?" Caelan didn't answer, but his grip on my hand changed. It wasn't only protective now, it was reverent. We ran, up a winding staircase carved into the living wood, then through a passage that opened into the palace's underbelly. Here the air warmed, carrying the distant scent of wax and flowers and expensive panic. Above us, the bells tolled again, closer together now. Dawn was coming like a blade. Caelan's breathing grew rough. I could feel the heat of his blood through his sleeve where it soaked the fabric. "Stop," I said suddenly. He tried to shake his head. We can't if you bleed out," I snapped, and the fear in my voice made my own stomach twist. Just a moment. I dragged him into a small alcove behind a tapestry of the Evergrove's founding. The woven scene showed the Crownwood in its glory, crowned brides kneeling beneath it, roots curling lovingly around their wrists like bracelets. It made me want to tear the tapestry down. Caelan leaned against the stone, jaw clenched. "Leora, sunrise." "I know," I whispered. My hands moved without waiting for permission. I pressed my fingers to his shoulder, feeling the slick warmth of blood under the cloth. "Hold still." I drew the needle, and the pale thread from the undersong shimmered again, faint but obedient. When I set the needle to his torn fabric, it slid through like water, not snagging, not resisting. I stitched, not like sewing a dress, like closing a wound in the world. The thread sank into his skin without pain, and the bleeding slowed instantly, then stopped as if the injury had been convinced to forget itself. The cut remained, but it looked cleaner now, edged with a faint silver glow that faded as my last stitch tightened. Caelan stared down at his shoulder, then at me. "What are you?" The question should have insulted me. It should have made me feel small. Instead, it made something inside me rise, stubborn and furious. "I'm human," I said, "and apparently that means something your kingdom is terrified to name." His breath shook out. "My mother." She said the Crownwood couldn't touch what was truly human. I swallowed, remembering the roots recoiling from my blood. Then why is it trying so hard to take me? Caelan's gaze sharpened, as if pieces were snapping into place. Because it can't bite you unless you consent, he said. But if it can force you to consent in front of the court, it wins. Not only your life, your legitimacy. My stomach turned. So Sunrise is a stage. Yes, he said, voice low. And Morel will make you the villain if you refuse. I stared at the tapestry again, at the kneeling brides with serene faces. My mouth went dry. What happens if someone says yes? I whispered. Caelan's face tightened. The crown roots into them. It drinks their magic first. And if there is no magic, he hesitated, and I felt his dread. Then it uses their body as a bridge, a conduit, a glove. I swallowed back bile. We need proof, I said. Not whispers. Not your mother's torn pages. Proof that the Crownwood is corrupted. Caelan's hand lifted, then dropped, as if he wanted to touch my cheek but didn't dare. There is something, he said. My mother hid a page, a real one, not in her journal. Somewhere the Queen could never admit to searching. The archives, I breathed, remembering the locked doors beneath the library and the way servants spoke of them like a haunted place. Caelan nodded once. The royal archive has a sealed cabinet. Only blood of the crown can open it. I looked at him, helpless. I don't have... His eyes flicked to my palm, where my blood had made roots recoil. Then he looked back at me with a kind of stunned realization. Maybe you do, he said. My heart slammed against my ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying your father wasn't only a tailor, Caelan whispered. And if the Crownwood is calling you Starfall Child, then the debt isn't only about sewing. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the alcove, fast and purposeful. Voices, guards, searching. Morel's hunting party. Caelan's hand closed around mine again. We go to the archive, he said. Now. My pulse roared in my ears as we slipped from behind the tapestry and into the hall. But as we turned the corner, a figure stepped into our path, tall, crowned, wrapped in pale robes that seemed to drink the light, the Queen herself. And she was looking at me as if she had known my face long before I was born. The Queen did not look like the rumors. People whispered about her as if she were a storm in a crown, as if her very gaze could snap bone. I expected something monstrous, something glowing, something obviously cursed. But when she stepped into the corridor, she looked almost ordinary in the way. Knives can look ordinary until they're in your skin. Her hair was pale, braided tight against her scalp, threaded with tiny branches that moved faintly as if alive. Her robe was the color of dawn fog. The crown on her head was not jeweled, not gilded, but grown, a ring of wood that sat too naturally, like it had sprouted from her thoughts. Her eyes fixed on me, not Caelan, me. I felt the undersong in my blood react, not loud this time, but wary, like an animal scenting a trap. So, the Queen said softly, the Crownwood speaks your name. My throat tried to close. I forced air in anyway. It shouldn't. Caelan stepped slightly in front of me, shoulders squared despite the fresh stitchwork on his wound. Mother. The word landed strangely in my mind. Not comforting, not warm, more like a title carved from obligation. The Queen didn't glance at him. You took her beneath the tree. I took her where your lies cannot reach, Caelan replied. That made her look at him at last, and in that brief shift of her gaze, I saw it. A flicker of green, deep in her pupils, not light, sap. It vanished as quickly as it came, like a blink, like a mistake. My stomach turned. The Queen's voice remained calm. Everything beneath the tree is mine, Caelan, including your rebellion. Caelan's hand tightened on his dagger. You sent the attendant. I did, she said, as if admitting she had sent a messenger to fetch wine. Sunrise comes, with or without your approval. The Evergrove is weakening. You know that. The border's thin. Creatures press against them. Our magic is starving. Her gaze slid back to me. And then you arrived. As if I were a disease. As if I were a cure. My fingers clenched around the starfall needle hidden in my palm. The metal felt cold, but the thread of pale light. Inside, it trembled like it hated being near her. I'm not your solution, I said. The Queen's mouth curved faintly. No, you are the Crownwood's solution. I swallowed. The Crownwood is corrupted. Caelan's breath hitched. The Queen's expression didn't change, but the air felt heavier, like the corridor itself leaned in to listen. Careful, she said. You are standing on the roots of your own ignorance. I shook my head, heart pounding. It's not a sacred tree choosing a bride. It's a mouth. It bites with vows. It needs consent. For the first time, the Queen's calm cracked. Not with rage, with fear. It passed over her face like a shadow, then vanished behind control so quickly I might have imagined it. But I didn't, because the undersong in my bones hummed in agreement. Caelan's voice turned sharp. You know. The Queen's jaw tightened. I know what a queen must know to keep a kingdom breathing. That isn't an answer, Caelan snapped. The Queen took one slow step forward. The branches in her crown shifted, whispering against each other. I have carried this crown for decades, she said quietly. I have done what was required. because required is what keeps children alive and borders sealed. When the Crownwood demanded offerings, I gave them. When it demanded silence, I gave that too. Her eyes pinned me. And now, it demands you. My pulse roared. Then refuse it. The queen's mouth twitched, humorless. Refuse it, and watch the Evergrove die. Watch the wards fail. Watch the courts turn on your prince. Watch the princesses claw each other apart in the panic. Watch the kingdom blame the human girl for every death that follows. Her voice softened, and that softness was worse than anger. You think you are resisting a tree, she said, but you are resisting a starving nation. They will not see your bravery. They will see your refusal and call it cruelty. The trap snapped fully into view. Morel didn't even need to twist the story much. The court would do it for her. Caelan's hand shifted, almost reaching for mine, then stopping as if he feared the queen would read it as weakness. Mother, he said, voice low, this is not salvation. It is surrender. The queen's gaze flicked to his shoulder. The stitched wound, the evidence of my hands. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You let her touch you. It wasn't a question. Heat crawled up my neck. I didn't know what it meant in elf law, but I could hear the danger in her tone, as if my touch was contamination, as if it was intimacy. Caelan lifted his chin. I trusted her. The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that made my blood go colder than any threat. She looked tired, just for a heartbeat. Not old, not weak. Tired in the way people look when they've been holding a door shut for too long and their hands are slipping. I did not come to kill you, she said softly, eyes on me again. I came to offer you a kinder path than Morel will. My stomach twisted. Kinder. At sunrise, the queen continued, you will be brought before the Crownwood. The court will watch. The tree will call. If you resist, you will be labeled the reason our magic fails. She took another step closer. The air around her felt slightly damp, like a forest after rain. If you accept, she said, I will make it swift. You will not suffer long, and I will ensure your family in the lower terraces is protected, fed, elevated. Your mother will never stitch again unless she chooses to. My breath stalled. My mother. The queen had said it so casually, like she had been holding my mother's life in her fingers all along. Caelan's voice sharpened like steel. Don't you dare. The queen didn't look at him. I dare because I must. Every queen before me dared. This is the cost of our crown. My fingers shook around the needle. The thread inside it trembled harder, almost angry. No, I whispered, but my voice felt small against the weight of her offer. The queen's gaze didn't soften. Think carefully, human. In one path you die, and the kingdom lives. In the other you live, and the kingdom dies. And they will hunt you across every border for the rest of your days. Caelan stepped forward finally. There is another path. The queen's eyes cut to him. There isn't. We need the archive, Caelan said. You know what my mother hid. The queen's face went still. Then, very quietly, she said, you have no right to speak of her. Caelan's voice didn't break, but something in it tightened. I have every right. She died because she refused to let the Crownwood swallow truth, and you helped them bury it. The corridor seemed to chill. The queen's gaze flicked back to me. That green glimmer flashed deep in her eyes again, stronger this time, like sap rising. For the first time, I understood. She wasn't only wearing a crown, she was wearing a leash, and whatever lived in that wood did not like being challenged. The queen's hand lifted slowly, palm outward. The air in front of us thickened. Roots surged beneath the stone floor, pressing upward, as if they wanted to erupt and wrap around my ankles, my wrists, my throat. Caelan moved instantly, grabbing my hand. Run! I didn't hesitate. We sprinted down the corridor, the floor trembling under our feet, as if the palace itself were trying to grab us. Behind us, the queen's voice followed, not shouted, but carried through the roots, through the walls, through my bones. You cannot outrun the tree, Leora. My name in her mouth sounded like a claim. We turned a corner, slipped through a narrow door, and slammed it shut behind us. Caelan shoved a bolt into place, breathing hard. The room was dark at first, then my eyes adjusted. We were in the library's underlevel. Shelves rose high, packed with sealed ledgers and scrolls bound in bark. The air smelled of dust and old ink. Somewhere above, footsteps thundered as guards searched. Caelan leaned close, voice urgent. The archive cabinet is here. If we can open it, we can get proof before sunrise. I swallowed, pulse still racing. And if we can't? Caelan's gaze locked on mine, fierce and steady. Then at sunrise, he said, they will make you choose between your life and my kingdom. I looked down at the needle in my hand, at the pale thread trembling like a living nerve, and I felt the truth settle hard in my chest. Sunrise was not where they would crown me. Sunrise was where they would try to break me into saying yes, and I had only a few hours to learn how to say no in a way that saved everyone. The underlevel of the library felt like the inside of a held breath. Dust clung to my tongue. The air was colder than the corridors above, and every sound seemed to travel too far, like the shelves were listening and storing it. Rows of ledgers and bark-bound scrolls rose on either side of us, their spines stamped with dates and symbols I couldn't read. Somewhere overhead, boots thundered past, guards, searching. The Queen's roots were not the only thing reaching for me now. Caelan moved like he'd been born in this darkness. He didn't hesitate at intersections, didn't pause to check markings. He simply turned, certain, and I followed, because the alternative was being found. We stopped at a sealed door disguised as shelving. If I hadn't watched him press his palm to a specific knot in the wood, I never would have guessed it was an entrance at all. The shelf slid aside with a faint groan, revealing a narrow chamber no bigger than a closet. In the center stood a cabinet made of blackened heartwood. No lock, no handle, just a smooth front panel with a single carving, a ring of roots around a falling star, my coin symbol. My pulse jumped. Caelan's voice was low. "This is it." The undersong thread inside my needle quivered, as if it recognized the carving too, trembling like a nerve. Caelan stepped closer and placed his palm on the cabinet. Nothing happened. He frowned and pressed harder. "It should open for crown blood." I swallowed. Maybe it's not only blood. Maybe it's consent. He glanced at me, and something tight in his expression loosened, just a fraction, like he hated how much that made sense. Without looking away from the cabinet, he drew his dagger and nicked the tip of his finger. A bright bead of red rose. He pressed it to the carving. At once, the cabinet shivered. Lines of faint green light bloomed under the wood like veins waking up. The carved roots seemed to move, shifting subtly as if they were trying to curl around his finger. Caelan hissed and pulled back. The cabinet's veins brightened. Hungry, my stomach turned. "It's trying to take you. It recognizes my blood," Caelan muttered, jaw tight. "And it wants more than a drop." The green light pulsed again, impatient. I could hear the Queen's earlier words echoing in my mind. "Everything beneath the tree is mine." But the way the veins moved wasn't ownership. It was appetite. I stepped forward before I could talk, myself out of it. "Let me try." Caelan's eyes sharpened. "Leora, no. I'm already in this," I whispered, and it flinched from my blood before. I didn't ask permission. I nicked my own fingertip with the needle point. The sting was small, sharp. A red bead welled up, bright against my skin. The moment my blood touched the carving, the cabinet did something entirely different. It didn't surge toward me. It recoiled. The green veins dimmed, as if someone had snuffed them with ash. The carving's root ring loosened, not tightening, and a soft click echoed inside the wood. The cabinet's front panel slid open by itself. Caelan stared at it, then at my hand, then back at the cabinet as if the world had tilted. "You are the key," he breathed. I didn't have time to answer. Inside the cabinet sat a single bundle wrapped in linen and sealed with wax. The wax stamp was not the royal crest. It was the falling star. My hands shook as I lifted it out. The linen felt strangely warm, like it had been waiting for living skin. I broke the seal. Within was a page, folded carefully, ink faded but still readable. It wasn't written in elf script. It was written in a human hand, my father's hand. My breath caught so hard my chest hurt. Caelan leaned close, and I began to read aloud because my voice was the only thing I could trust to keep me from shattering. "I write this so the truth survives even if I do not. The Crownwood is not one being. Beneath the bark is an older hunger that learned to wear a tree like a crown. It cannot consume what is truly human, but it can use a human body as a bridge if the human gives it the one thing it cannot steal: consent. The vow is the opening of the mouth. The crown is the bite. If the human speaks yes beneath the living crown, the hunger will walk in. Skin it cannot taste, and it will never be bound again." My vision blurred. I swallowed and kept reading, forcing the words through my throat. There is one counter. The starfall stitch is not decoration. It is a seam meant to close what should not open. At the moment of crowning, stitch the living crown to silence using the undersong thread and the true name of the hunger. Not the name the court praises, the name the roots fear. Then refuse the vow. No yes, no surrender. If done, the hunger will be forced to unroot and the true tree may heal. A second page had been tucked beneath the first, smaller, torn at the edge. One line, written darker, as if pressed into the paper with anger. "The true name is Verthorn." Caelan inhaled sharply. His face went pale in a way I hadn't seen before. Verthorn is a word from the oldest songs, a thing they say the first kings buried. "Buried," I whispered. "Not destroyed." Above us, the muffled sound of voices surged. Closer now. Someone had found the hidden shelf door. Caelan took the pages from my hands, folding them quickly and pressing them to his chest as if they were a heartbeat. "This is proof," he said. "This is everything." My hands were still trembling, so I clenched them until my nails bit my palms. "And it tells us what to do." Caelan's gaze locked on mine, fierce and steady. "It tells us what you must do." I flinched. "Don't say it like that." He stepped closer, lowering his voice until it felt like a secret shared in the middle of war. "Leora, Listen to me. I will not let them force you. I will not let them turn your word into their weapon." The sincerity in his eyes made my throat tighten. I hated how much I wanted to believe him. "And if the court turns on you?" I whispered. "If your mother, my mother is already lost to this," he said, and the grief in his voice was so raw it made my chest ache. "But I am not, and I am choosing you." The title I'd tried not to remember surged in my mind, cruel and bright. Every princess wanted him, and here, in a dust-choked chamber beneath the library, the elf prince looked at a human girl with no magic and chose her anyway, not for power, for truth, for defiance, for something that felt terrifyingly like tenderness. Footsteps slammed against the hidden shelf outside. The wood groaned under the odor of fists. "Open in the Queen's name!" a voice shouted. Caelan grabbed my hand. "We have minutes." We slipped back through the disguised door, and the moment we entered the underlevel aisle, Caelan dragged a heavy ladder down with a crash, blocking the path. It wouldn't hold long, but it didn't need to. We ran. Past shelves that blurred into dark walls, past reading tables abandoned in panic, up a narrow stairwell that opened into the main library hall, and there, beyond the tall windows, I saw it, the first edge of dawn, pale light spilling over the treetops like a warning. The bells began to ring again, not slow now, but urgent, calling the court to witness what they believed would be a sacred moment. Caelan pulled me toward a side corridor, but as we rounded the corner, a line of guards appeared, ahead, blocking the way to the courtyard, and behind them, Princess Morel stepped into view, calm as if she'd been waiting for us to arrive exactly on time. Her eyes flicked to Caelan's chest, where the folded pages were hidden beneath his coat. Then she smiled. "You found something," she said softly. "How wonderful." My stomach dropped, because she didn't look surprised. She looked prepared, and that meant she had been hunting this proof for a long time. Morel lifted her hand, and the guards closed in. "Bring them," she said. "The Crownwood is already awake." Behind her, through the open archway to the courtyard, I saw the tops of the Crownwood's branches moving against the brightening sky, not swaying, reaching, as if it already knew my mouth might try to say no. They didn't drag me. That would have been too honest. Instead, Morel's guards surrounded Caelan and me with ceremonial calm, as if escorting a guest of honor, rather than a human girl being delivered to a hungry crown. The library's tall doors opened onto the courtyard, and cold dawn air poured in, sharp with frost and sap. The court was already gathered. Princesses stood in a glittering crescent, each wrapped in her finest magic. I saw swirls of light at their fingertips, delicate sparks that made the morning look enchanted. Nobles filled the steps and balconies, faces bright with fear disguised as reverence. At the far end, beneath an arch of living branches, the Crownwood waited. It was larger than any tree should be, its trunk wide as a tower, its bark etched with patterns that looked like old scars. The branches did not sway in the wind. They leaned toward me. When I stepped onto the stone path leading to the tree, a murmur rose from the crowd. That same hush I'd felt in the moonlit gallery, except this time it wasn't admiration. It was hunger. They needed me to say yes, so they could keep breathing and call it sacred. Morel walked just ahead of me like a bride's guide. She kept her chin high, her smile composed, but her eyes darted to Caelan's chest, where the folded pages were hidden. She knew. She had guessed we had found something that could ruin her stage. The queen stood beneath the crownwood, pale and still. Her grown crown looked heavier than ever. When she looked at me, I saw that faint green glimmer in her eyes again, stronger now, like sap rising behind glass. She opened her mouth, but the voice that came out was not entirely hers. "The Crownwood calls," it said. The branches creaked, and a shape began to form above the queen's head. Roots rose like fingers weaving themselves into a circlet. Leaves unfurled, pale and luminous. A living crown, breathing and eager. My stomach turned as the undersong in my bones thrummed, low and warning. Beside me, Caelan's hand brushed mine, quick and steady. He didn't hold me. He reminded me I wasn't alone. Morel turned to the crowd, voice bright. "Behold, the tree has chosen." A cheer tried to form, and failed halfway, strangled by nerves. I stepped forward, then stopped before the altar stone at the Crownwood's base. Moss glowed faintly there, and the air smelled sweeten, a way that made my teeth ache. The queen lifted her hands. The living crown floated forward, suspended by roots that moved like serpents. A robed attendant approached with a ceremonial veil, ready to place it over my hair, ready to make me look like an offering. My throat tightened. This was the moment my father wrote about. The vow is the opening of the mouth. The crown is the bite. I felt the court's eyes press into my skin. I felt their fear, their hope, their desperation. I felt my mother's face in my mind, the way she'd kissed my forehead the last time I left home, as if she feared she would never do it again. The queen's borrowed voice softened, coaxing. "Kneel." Accept. Speak the vow. My lips parted. The air itself seemed to lean forward, waiting, and I did the only thing that could buy me a heartbeat. I will speak, I said clearly. The crowd stilled. Morel's smile sharpened. Caelan went rigid beside me, but he didn't interrupt. He understood. A wrong move now would make them call him traitor, and me monster. I lifted my chin and looked at the tree, at the living crown hovering above me like a mouth about to close. But I will speak in my own words, I continued, so the court understands what it asks of me. A ripple of unease moved through the nobles. Morel's eyes narrowed. The ritual has words. I am human, I said, voice steady. Your ritual is not mine. If I am to save your kingdom, then you will hear me. The queen's gaze fixed on me. The green glimmer flared, like something inside her hated my confidence. Speak, the queen said, but the word carried a threat. I turned slightly, letting the crowd see my face. I came to your palace with no title, I said. No magic, no court behind me. I sewed dresses and kept my eyes down because your world taught me that was the only way to survive. I let the silence stretch, felt it hook into their attention. Yet the Crownwood called my name, I continued, and I have learned why. Morel stepped forward fast. Lies. Caelan's voice cut through hers, fierce and calm. Not lies. He reached into his coat and pulled the folded pages free, holding them high so the front rows could see the human script. My mother hid the truth, he said. A truth written by the human who saved her life. The crownwood is not holy. Something beneath it wears the tree like a crown. The crowd rippled. Princesses whispered. The attendants stiffened. Morel's face twisted. Your Highness, you would unravel the kingdom with a scrap of paper? Caelan didn't look at her. His eyes were on the queen. Mother, you know. The queen's hands trembled slightly. The living crown hovered, roots quivering as if irritated. I felt the undersong thread in my needle respond, a faint pull against my palm. My fingers tightened around it, hidden at my side. I took a slow breath. Then I spoke the name my father left behind like a blade. Bearthorn, I said. The effect was immediate. The crownwood's branches jerked, not in wind, but in pain. A harsh sound cracked through the courtyard, like wood splitting under pressure. The living crown shuddered midair, roots spasming as if they'd been burned. The queen gasped, her face blanching. That green glimmer in her eyes flared violently, then flickered. Morel stumbled back a step, fear finally breaking through her poise. Don't say that. The crowd fell into a stunned silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. The borrowed voice in the queen's throat changed. It deepened, twisting, like sap turning rancid. You must not, it hissed. I lifted my hand, bringing the starfall needle into view for the first time. The pale undersong thread shimmered faintly in dawn light, almost invisible unless you knew how to look. I will, I said, and my voice didn't shake, because I know what you are. The living crown lunged toward me, faster now, desperate. Caelan moved, stepping between the roots and my face, raising his arm to block. The roots wrapped around his forearm, trying to force him down. He hissed in pain, but held his ground. Now, Leora. I stepped in close, heart hammering, and I did what my hands had always done. I stitched, not into cloth, into living hunger. The needle sank into a root strand as cleanly as it would into silk. The undersong thread followed, sliding through the tree's flesh without resistance. I looped it once, then again, binding the crown's movement, pulling the root toward the altar stone as if pinning fabric to a table before cutting. The crown fought. Leaves flared, roots writhed. A low roar rolled through the courtyard, not sound but pressure, like the sky itself pressing down. The queen staggered, clutching her own crown as if it were trying to grow into her skull. Morel screamed, "Stop her!" Guards surged forward, but they hesitated when the crownwood's branches snapped down between them and the altar, slamming into stone like protective arms. The true tree was waking, and it did not like being worn. I pulled the thread tight, my fingers burning. My palms ached. The needle felt heavier with every stitch, but I didn't stop. I kept my eyes on the crown, on the place where roots met leaf, on the seam I was creating, the starfall stitch, a seam meant to close what should not open. I whispered the name again, not as a curse, but as a command stitched with truth. Bearthorn. The living crown convulsed. Splash of pale green sap burst from the root line, spraying the altar stone. The smell was wrong, sour and metallic, like rot, disguised as sweetness. The queen cried out, a sharp human sound. Then her knees hit the stone. Her grown crown cracked, not in half, but along the inner ring, as if something inside it had snapped loose. For one heartbeat, the green glimmer vanished from her eyes. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw her, not a queen. A woman who had been holding a starving kingdom on her back until it bent her spine. Her lips parted, trembling. What have I done? The borrowed voice snarled through her, furious now. Yes, it rasped. Say yes. The hunger wasn't speaking to me anymore. It was trying to force the vow out of the queen's mouth. because if it couldn't bite me, it would bite the one already wearing its crown. Caelan saw it too. He turned toward her, eyes wide. "Mother, don't!" The queen shook, fighting herself, her hands pressed against her throat, as if holding the word back. I tightened the last stitch, anchoring the living crown's root to the altar stone, pinning its mouth closed. Then I made my choice in front of all of them. "I refuse," I said clearly, and the word rang through the courtyard like a bell. "I refuse the vow. I refuse the crown. I refuse to feed you." The undersong surged into a bright, clear hum, no longer pleading, singing. The roots of the living crown yanked backward violently, as if something had been ripped out of it. A dark shape, not smoke, but shadowed sap, tore free from the crown's underside and thrashed in the air for a breath. The court gasped as one. The shadow tried to reach for me, but it couldn't taste me. It slammed into the seam I'd stitched, hit the bound crown mouth, and recoiled. The true tree answered. The crownwood's trunk flared with light, not green but gold, warm as sunrise. Branches lifted, not reaching for my throat now, but spreading outward like a body taking its first clean breath in centuries. The shadow shrieked soundlessly and was pulled down, not into me, not into the queen, but into the earth beneath the altar where the undersong became a deep, closing chord. A door shutting, a mouth sealed. The living crown collapsed into harmless roots and leaves, dropping to the stone like ordinary plant matter at last. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then a wind swept through the courtyard, smelling of real pine, real rain, real life. The Evergrove's lanterns flickered, then steadied. I felt something in the air relax, like a held breath released. The queen sagged forward, hands shaking. Caelan rushed to her side, catching her shoulders before she fell. Morel stood frozen, face pale. Her magic, usually shimmering at her fingertips, sputtered like a candle in water. The court stared at the fallen roots, at the sap on the altar stone, at the proof that their sacred story had been a cage. A murmur rose, different now, not worship, realization. Caelan turned to the crowd, voice carrying. "The Crownwood was stolen," he said, "used, corrupted, and this human girl with no magic saved it by refusing to become our sacrifice." He looked at me then, in front of everyone, and his gaze made my chest ache in the best and worst way. "I choose her," he said simply, "not as a ritual, as a truth." A wave of reaction rolled through the princesses. Some looked furious, some looked shaken. One or two looked relieved, as if they had been waiting their whole lives for someone to finally say the quiet part aloud. The queen lifted her head, eyes clearer now, voice hoarse, and painfully human. "Enough," she said. "No more offerings." Her gaze found mine. For a long moment, she looked like she might hate me. Instead, she bowed her head, not as a queen to a subject, as a person acknowledging a debt. "Starfall," she whispered, and in that single word, I felt the old vow shift from threat to promise. Days later, the Evergrove did not wither. The borders held. The court, stripped of its prettiest lie, began the slow, difficult work of telling a new truth. Not everyone thanked me, not everyone forgave, but the crownwood no longer reached like a mouth. It stood like a tree. As for me, I didn't wake with magic glowing in my hands. I didn't become a princess overnight. I remained human, still stitched together by stubbornness and fear and courage I never knew I had. But when I walked the palace corridors now, I didn't keep my eyes down. And when Caelan reached for my hand, he did it in public, as if choosing me was the easiest truth in his world, because every princess had wanted him, and the elf prince had chosen the girl with no magic, not because I was safe, because I was free.